Wow, that looks pretty good.
One of the biggest deals for me when a new phone comes out is how is it in low light? The 12 Pro made great strides in that category, the 13 improved on it, and now we've got the 14. So I went out and shot some low light footage comparing the 14 to the 13 using the native camera app.
Okay, so 14 Pro Max wide camera, the main camera. It's a 24mm now, and it's an f1.78. But the sensor is much bigger than the 13 Pro. I believe it's 50 to 60%, maybe 65% bigger. So that should make a pretty big difference. Here's the 13 Pro Max. It's a 26mm wide and it's an f1.5, so it's a faster lens. However, it's a smaller sensor. But I will say this looks pretty similar to me. Overall, the 14 has a little bit less noise, but this is pretty close, at least in this particular scenario. Now here's a side-by-side. Look off to the side of the pool where it's not lit. Panning across here, especially down on the sidewalk there. There it looks pretty good on both, but coming up you'll see some bigger difference when we switch cameras. Now the 14 Pro Max Ultra Wide. Now this is an f2.2, but again, it's a new sensor, it's a bigger sensor. Pay attention to the sidewalk there to the left of the frame. That looks really good on this camera. Really good, actually. Now the 13, this is an f1.8, but it's a smaller sensor. And now look at that pavement down there. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can see that, but it is bouncing around, very artifacty, a lot of noise, a lot of compression. The 14 Pro Max is considerably better on the ultra wide, even though it's a slower aperture. That new sensor has made a world of difference. You can see side by side right there. The 14 Pro Max is nice and clean. And so that's really great. All right, now I went to the other side of the pool to test out the telephoto camera. The telephoto cameras really didn't change. I mean, they did. This is a 14 Pro Max. It's still an f2.8 and it's a 3x 77mm equivalent. But as you can tell, it's still really noisy. It is a new sensor and it is a bigger sensor evidently, but it's still not great in low light. The 13 Pro Max wasn't great in low light either, and neither is this one. So here's the 13 Pro Max, and it looks similar, but it's even worse. I would say this looks kind of like the moon landing footage from the 1960s. It's pretty bad. It's compressed and really unusable. Even in the pool, it gets compressed where it's bright light, but away from the pool, it's just way too noisy. So here's a side-by-side, and it's subtle, but the 14 is better. But again, this is not a lens that I would use in low light. It's nice for bright light, and that used to be the case using phones, period, but they've gotten so much better these days, but this telephoto still needs low light work.
Shooting outdoors at night is one thing, but what about shooting indoors in low light? For me, that's a pretty common occurrence, especially shooting B-roll when I'm running and gunning. So I set up a scenario right here behind me to mimic that.
All right, first up here, 14 Pro Max, and this is no lighting in quotes. There is light coming in a door behind me through frosted panes of glass, and so it's very soft and it's very light. And this room is actually much darker than this looks. It's a very dark room. And so here is the standard wide, f1.78, 24mm, and this is very low light, and it is a little bit noisy, but it's not bad. Here's the ultra wide. It too is pretty noisy, but it's passable. Again, you gotta remember, this is almost no light in this room. Telephoto, noisy, but definitely usable in this scenario. Now the 14 Pro Max with lighting. I have one light that I turned on, and this is my workbench where I shoot a lot of product shots, etc. And the standard wide with light on looks good. I'd have no complaints of that shot whatsoever. A little bit of noise, but nothing out of the ordinary. Same with this ultra wide. Ultra wide looks good. A little bit of noise, but very minimal. Even zooming in 200%, look to the left there by the gimbal, looks good. Telephoto with light on it, looks really good. All right, now the 13 Pro Max, same setup, no lighting. And here is the wide. And the wide looks good. It's an f1.5. It is noisy, but it's passable. Now the ultra wide, this is kind of sketchy. This is really noisy. It's a 1.8, but this is not usable really in my opinion. The telephoto looks okay here. It's noisy, but I think it's passable. Now the 13 Pro Max with lighting on. The standard wide f1.5 looks great. Very usable. The ultra wide here with lighting looks good. However, when you zoom in, it still looks okay, but if you look at the edges where the light drops off, it starts getting kind of noisy. And then the 3x telephoto looks fine with light on it.
Overall, the 14 and the 13 are pretty similar with a few exceptions like the ultra wide. The 14 is much better there. So to really show how much these phones have improved over the years, I'm going to put my 11 Pro Max in the mix now.
All right, now the 11 Pro Max, and this is no lighting. You'll see right away this is unusable, and this is the best camera. 26mm f1.8, not working. Ultra wide, this looks like moon footage as well, maybe worse than moon footage. Unusable. And it has a 52mm tele. It's an f2.0, however, it's a very small sensor, and this does not work. But now we'll look at it with lighting. With lighting, the standard wide looks good. This is usable. The ultra wide looks usable too under the light. However, when you zoom in, and this is 200%, look at all the noise in the shadow area. That is actually unusable. And the f2 telephoto looks good with light on it.
One thing I haven't touched on yet with the 14 Pro is it also has a 2x tele like the 11 Pro, but it's not a separate camera. It's the same camera. Because of the 48 megapixel sensor, it just crops in. And the great thing, there's no loss of quality.
Okay, back out here at the pool. This is the 2x tele on the 14 Pro Max, 48mm, and it's still an f1.78 because you're using the main camera. And so just like the main camera, the previous 24mm shot I showed, it looked great, and this looks great. Very low noise, not seeing really any artifacts, good sharpness, even shooting down in here to the water. Having this 2x tele that's actually part of the main camera because of the 48 megapixel sensor is really cool. Now we'll go back in the studio and shoot it with no lighting. So this is the 2x tele with no light, and it looks good. I think that's completely passable. And now here it is with light. And this looks great. I have no complaints right here. Love having this option now.
One other feature that's been greatly improved in the 14 Pro is the front-facing camera, the selfie camera. And as a matter of fact, it is really good. I'm actually shooting right now on that camera. 4K, 24 frames per second in cinematic mode. That's pretty cool, I gotta admit. So I decided to compare them too.
All right, selfie camera in the studio with no lighting. And it's an f1.9. And I gotta say, it's a little noisy, but man, it is totally usable. The 13 Pro Max here is an f2.2, a lot noisier, but somewhat usable. And the 11 Pro Max here is also an f2.2, smaller sensor. This is completely unusable. And now with lighting. 14 Pro Max with lighting, this looks great. This looks really good. It's surprisingly good. Remember, that's a selfie camera. 13 Pro Max, f2.2, noisy, especially on the edges, but totally usable. And even the 11 Pro Max under good lighting is usable. It drops off and gets pretty noisy quickly, but if you're in good light, that is okay to use.
The main takeaway for me on the 14 Pro is that the ultra-wide camera is much improved. It is dramatically better. And so is the selfie camera. The main wide camera is better, but not dramatically, and the tele is pretty much the same. Maybe it's just a little bit better. But overall, the low light capabilities are improved across the board, and so if you're using an 11 or before, the upgrade is a no-brainer. If you're a 12 or 13 Pro user, it really just depends on how much low light shooting you do as to whether it's warranted or not. Speaking of that, for those of you interested, I will now play the low light chart shots I did all back to back and side to side so you can compare them, but I will have no commentary, just music and the footage.